And ladies and gentlemen, so this weekend has been like a buffet treat for you guys and me. And today I'm bringing actually my editor of my book, Mahadashas at the Speed of Light, Corey Dowds, who Ryan Kersak introduced me to. And it was one of the greatest, combinations I have become a part of. Greatest, you know, uh, couple made in heaven. So Corey, thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So you are a Vedic astrologer. So what we want to know, I mean, I want to get into many other things, but I want to know how you, from where you are, how you got into astrology, knowing you're in, the southern United States.
Yeah, it's definitely not something very commonly known about here in Charleston, South Carolina. We're in the deep South, or
Yeah.
the Bible Belt, as they call it. And I have nothing against that, but I just, I never really identified that much with my culture that I was born into, you
Yeah.
know? And so when I'd always been into a lot of Asian philosophies and Eastern culture, even the art when I was young, I would see the art and it would be like, there's like something different being conveyed there than just basic subject object stuff. And so I got real into just Eastern culture as I got older and got into meditation. I was actually living outside of Asheville for a short while, and that's where I met Ryan. And he's a very good, skilled yogi and meditator, so he sort of helped me get on track with that. And then it was just a matter of time. He read my chart, and he kind of blew me away with some of the stuff that he pointed out to me that we didn't even know each other that well. And I was just really intrigued, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. You know, you just sort of fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And if anything you do, it doesn't have to be astrology. If you feel that love and you can't stop thinking about it and you wake up thinking about it and you go to sleep thinking about it, you should keep pursuing it.
Yes. Very truly said.
So that's basically what's happened for me.
So when were you like in the Eastern philosophy, as in you were like in reading about a Hindu culture or Asian culture, or?
Well, at first it was like everything. Just give me whatever I can get.
Yeah.
So I think I read some books by Alan Watts about Zen and Buddhism when I was young, and I read some just random back of the world history section. I'd always flip to like Buddhism and Hinduism and Asian stuff.
Yeah.
And then I got a lot more into Indian culture. Not that I don't have any problems with Buddhism or that stuff, but I was really into. Here's what it was. I'm a skateboarder. I started out being just a rambunctious skater, and another skater guy was like, you need to read the book, Autobiography of a Yogi. So that was sort of the thing. Like a lot of people in the West, that's a lot of what gets us into it, because he wrote the book so well and he learned English and he came to us, to America, to help show us. I mean, he's dedicated his whole life. He didn't want to. He wanted to sit up on the Himalayas and just be renowned and everything. But when I read that book, that was probably the thing that got me in, really focused on sort of like the Vedic culture. And when I learned about enlightenment, that was something I could respond to. That was something that I could get with, we can wake up, like now we can do stuff about it. We don't just have to believe in a thing far away and hope that when we die, we'll make it, So it's sort of that stuff. And then that led me to astrology, because astrology is like a great way to get analytical if you have a really analytical mind. Okay, well, I believe in God, but really, why is God making me do this?
Yeah.
Astrology is sort of God showing his work.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in astrology, who has been like your mentor, teacher? I know Ryan was the initial spark, but any teachers or gurus?
Yeah. Ryan was definitely a major teacher. And so indirectly, I also learned through Richard Fish a lot, because he was sort of Ryan's teacher, and was a Vedic astrologer. He passed away just a few years ago, but he was a really good Vedic and Western astrologer. And then I learned from, every book I could get, like Baladipika, Brihat Prashara, Horshastra, all that stuff. I took some initial courses with Ryan and Richard Fish, and then I found Ernst Wilhelm. Started studying with him a lot. So I do study with him a lot, and he's pretty mind blowing.
When I first saw you, I'm like, is he a younger brother of Ernest? You guys look so much. You guys might be past life brothers. I'm telling you, that's what I'm like. Man, this guy is like a younger version of Ernest.
Yeah, I guess there's something to that. Maybe you never know. My mother is German, so, and I know he's got a German background, but then I've also got a lot of other stuff.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, he's a great teacher either way. And when I did notice him, when I first saw him, he's like, seeing his face, it struck me as like, this is an important person I should pay attention to.
Yeah.
But I've learned from a lot of things too. You know, I'm open to everything. I really like even people on Facebook, Juliana Swanson, Kenneth Johnson, a lot of people that I've become friends with ever since I got into this. Learn constantly from them on the internet, on groups. We're in this current age where I would have probably liked to have learned in a classical way, like, you know, with the guru, like singing tree every day, you know what I mean? But just hasn't been my karma for this life.
Yeah, for many, including me. Now, when it came to the astrological subject, what subject did you really concentrate on? Was it like Parashara astrology, Jaimini, Bhrigu, or was it just one thing, or all of them that you concentrated on?
Yeah, so I first started studying just kind of really what everyone learns the basics of, you know, like the Akva, like introductory stuff, which is mostly like Parashara principles, and then just like the traditional ideas that you're just sort of taught that aren't even, maybe who even knows what books they come from. Just general ideas. So I also read all those introductory books like Astrology of the Seers, Light on Life, books by James Braha. I'm forgetting Beneath the Vedic Sky. Man, I mean, that book.
Whatever books you have there, I've got them right here.
Yeah, the spine's just falling apart on some of these, so that's yeah, and then so I guess Parashara is the main thing I've studied, and I could spend my whole life just on that.
Just on that, yeah.
So much there. And you know, then I started learning through Ernst. Ernst has done some pretty amazing work with the Jaimini stuff. So if you're into that, I highly recommend getting into that. The accuracy on some of those techniques is just ridiculous. How accurate you can be. But so yeah, I got into all that, and that is really fun. The Jaimini stuff I find to be really good for like objective factors, like, you know, what does this person do? What kind of house do they live in? Things like that are just really like concrete and, as Ernst says, or I like to say objective. And then Parashara oftentimes I find can get really detailed for the more subjective things, like how you really feel emotionally, all the little ups and downs in your career and stuff can be, or like the Avashtas of the Parashara Avashtas, like Lajitati Avashtas and things like that. Venus being starved by the moon, little things like that really tell us a lot of the intricacies of our consciousness, like why we don't get along in relationships. We might still be married, like Jaimini might be saying he gets married.
Yeah.
He's not even, and he's married to an amazing spouse, it says. But then from the Parashara side, it can say, but he still doesn't appreciate it for certain reasons or things like that. So, and I don't see them as being separate schools. A lot of people see them as being like one or the other.
Two separate entities.
I don't see them that way. I feel like they're great for just different things. So, for example, when I do a full-on consultation with someone, I'm spending a number of hours, like 4 or 5 hours working on their chart. I'm going to do a lot of the Parashara stuff to get really detailed, look at, you know, how many points is the moon aspecting Venus, you know, and look at the Vargas, which Varga is the moon really strong and really being felt in when it's hitting that. But then if I'm just doing a 20-minute reading, like I do the Folly Farmers Market here on the beach every Wednesday, and I just do little quick readings, $20 for 20 minutes. I'll either use Prajna if they have a question immediately,
Yeah.
Or I'll use if they just want to know about themselves, I'll just use the basic Jaimini stuff, looking at the Atmakaraka or the Karakamsha, as they say, or Swamsha, looking at the Atmakaraka and the Navamsha, reading it from there. You can see some really just obvious things right away, like, oh, you lived in a brick house growing up probably, or, oh, you probably work for the government, if the sun is your Atmakaraka and it's in Leo or something, or, just like, and they're like pretty concrete, objective things. They're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So does that give you kind of a good idea?
Yeah. Knowing about what you just said about Karakamsha, what have you discovered of just looking at your normal birth chart versus Karakamsha Lagna? And, what have you found? What is the importance of that in Germany?
So it's like the birth chart is showing your path that you're on and everything, and that's a really big deal. But the Karakamsha, that can show you, it's in the Navamsha. And what is the Navamsha about? It's like the number 9. It's like more like what you anchor to, like the grander sort of theme of your life. And so in the same way, that's like who you are deep down, sort of. Your Karakamsha can have a lot to do with what you're going to really like identify with as you go down your path, who you, okay, for example, my chart, my Karakamsha stuff says I'm an astrologer, like deep down. But my Rashi chart says I'm going to have to work in retail businesses. I'm going to have to work and I'm not going to be able to be an astrologer my whole life for a career. I'm going to have to run a leather shop because it's Saturn in the 10th, leather, and aspected by Mercury, which is like skin. And so dead skins, and has connections to Venus, so luxury. So I sell leather goods as my path is going on, but deep down I don't identify with that so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not what makes my heart sing. And
right.
That can be seen from the Navamsha and the Karakamsha stuff.
Now, there's this method of saying that, okay, you look at the Atma Karka in the Navamsha, and wherever the Navamsha, the sign is of the Atma Karka, you just make that the ascendant in the birth chart. Is that what your technique is, or is it something else?
That's not exactly it, but I would just read it from the Navamsha.
Okay, so you make that Karakamsha, the Atma Karka, the ascendant.
Yeah,
in the Navamsha.
Yeah, and then if it's an even sign, count backwards, which I know sounds crazy and confusing, but if it's an even sign, that's what it says to do. So you count backwards, and this is controversial. A lot of people will interpret this differently, but this is just what I found to work. If you don't, that's okay. But I've found that. So say your Atmakaraka is Mars.
Yeah.
Say in the Rashi chart, it falls in Aries, we'll say.
Yeah.
In the Navamsha, it happens to fall in Sagittarius. So you'll have a Sagittarius Swamsha or whatever. So I would read the chart in the Navamsha from Sagittarius. And and so then if, say, from Sag, say, Venus is exalted in Pisces in the 4th, we know the person grew up in an awesome home, or a palatial mansion, as Jaimini puts it, if an exalted planet is in the 4th from the Swamsha. And I guess that like so easily. Like when the farmers market people show up, it's very rarely wrong. And that's a fun, quick thing to do. But there's a lot of fun things you can do like that. Now, with respect to the Rashi chart, also look where the Atmakaraka is in the Rashi chart and read that sign. So Mars, in this example, in Aries, read it from Mars in Aries and see, see everything.
So make Mars the ascendant just in the birth chart itself and look at the planets from there.
Yeah, make the Atmakaraka the ascendant in the birth chart. Yes.
And whenever, like, if somebody, let's say, doing a reading from you and they say, Corey, I want to know what my destiny is. What am I here to do? What's my life path? What do you use in those terms? Well, like, how you said, I'm working in a leather shop, but I'm really an astrologer. So the destiny, like, what is that? How do you look at that?
That's something that I love to work with, I guess, because my own personal sort of, because that's been an emphasis on my life. Like my Atmakaraka is in the 1st house, for example. So, my own self path and what I'm doing, my own dharma is really important. So when it comes to people asking me about that, I do focus a lot on the Atmakaraka, a lot on Jaimini. Basically, without knowing that, I would have missed a lot of things from just reading the Parashara chart like we normally do, like you know how to do. And before I knew Jaimini, I would still do pretty good, but every now and then I would miss it. Like, say the chart is saying a lot of managerial stuff, you know, maybe entrepreneur, CEO stuff, but then the Atmakaraka, Navamsa stuff saying government work. So without that extra ingredient, I would miss that you're going to work for the government somehow, you know what I mean? Or that's going to tie in, you would miss important things. So yes, the Jaimini objective factors are important, but then when you talk about destiny, I think of Rahu and Ketu pretty quickly too, because Rahu and Ketu are just those things that are sort of a lot harder to avoid, you know, like there are karmas in our life that we can sort of avoid more easily, but then Rahu and Ketu tends to show things that, I mean, you're just gonna have to deal with one way or the other, you know, in a lot of ways.
What is your view on Rahu Ketu? What have you learned in your own internal engineering? What do you came to know about Rahu and versus Ketu?
So I like to think of them as almost like ascendant points, just like the 1st and 7th house.
Yeah.
And so they represent, you know, like Rahu represents where you're going to have to focus on, where you're going to have to do. You don't maybe want to, you want to rest on your Ketu, the flag. You know, Ketu means like your flag, your conquered territory from previous lives. So that's oftentimes what we want to make work out. Or like, if only this happened, you know?
Yeah.
And then you tell the person, look, even when you've had that happen in your life, you weren't as content as you think. You need to focus on this, the Rahu thing. And then they don't listen. They don't really want to hear that.
Yeah.
Or at least at first. As you get older, you learn it one way or the other. And that's what I mean by destiny. The Rahu and Ketu, they are sort of like those factors. Ernst likes to call it like Rahu is the reason you incarnated. You know what I mean? Like that's the main reason that you incarnated. And I found that's lines up with everything I've seen so far. So
is that like Rahu then pretty much is your career because you were reincarnated for that, or was it just maybe to build a temple or to teach or what?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be career. It can be, and Rahu acts like Saturn, and Saturn has to do with our karmas and our career and our work we'll do. But say in your past life, you were way too focused on career. So you have your Ketu in Capricorn, you know, or in the 10th house or something like that. Then you have Rahu naturally in the 4th or in Cancer. So you have to work on your emotions and you have to not care about career, but you're going to want to have an awesome career that gives you a status and you feel royal. You know what I mean? Like you feel like, you know, it doesn't matter that I'm a mess inside. I'm in control of all these things. You know, I'm a CEO. I run a business. I run this and that. And that's just, but deep down, like, you know, when they come to me, I'm like, I know that doesn't really make you happy. You're kind of compensating and you need to work on your inner life, you know, your emotions, and you need to learn to feel happy and not care what's going on out there, you know? And that's what Cancer's about. Cancer's also a Brahmin sign or a moksha sign. It's where Jupiter is exalted. So in a lot of ways, they need to kind of like work on their interior life, you know? So that would be a thing. That doesn't really mean Rahu's indicating your career or Rahu's really indicating career is not the thing to focus on in this life. So does that kind of help you?
Yeah. And what is your perception of Ketu? What is this, besides the flag thing that you spoke about?
Yeah, so Ketu is Ketu's like our heart, you know, like where we're most sincere, where we're really sincere, where we're gonna be really critical of ourselves about, or we're gonna be like almost overly a perfectionist about, because we've sort of conquered that. We have really high expectations of how that is, but it doesn't always work out well for you. It can. One thing that should really be noted is that the dignity of the lords of Rahu and Ketu is a big factor on how well they're going to work. And there are other factors too. You know, there are certain places where they're a lot more challenging than others. like the 4th and 10th house is a pretty challenging place for them to be in. But when it comes to Ketu, yeah, he's your security, you know, your comfort zone.
Yeah. It's what you know best, pretty much.
Yeah, it's what you really want. And you're like, why couldn't I just have that? And especially now during these eclipse times, you know, like during the eclipse times, we've probably got two more weeks or so of that sort of more stressful, weird effects on our consciousness. You'll really want to have things that you just can't seem to have. You know what I mean? And it's so frustrating. How that plays out for you depends on your chart. If you have Ketu in the 7th house, then it's probably a lot about relationships. And during the 6 months, or not 6 months, during the last 4 weeks and during the next couple weeks, it may be a little bit of a stressful and confusing time for relationships. And you're just like, why aren't they working out no matter what, or blah, blah. Someone who has Ketu and Rahu in the 2nd or 8th axis, which has to do with money and income, they're going to have money stresses at this time. You know, they're going to be worried about that.
Man, that's like a 24-hour thing for everybody all year long. That's like an eclipse all year long for most people.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that, like, there's almost always a stressful thing happening in the stars, and we all have this stuff going on, and so life's just stressful on planet Earth.
Yeah.
So I never try to make it seem like, oh, this bad transit's happening, but everything will be okay next, because the whole time I've been studying astrology, at least like the last 5 or 6 years since I've had a software and been studying it, there's never been an ideal time. And I don't think there's ever going to be a perfectly ideal time. I mean, there maybe are, and, you know, that's when, like, Krishna is born or something, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one thing that we all have to kind of learn to deal with. And, you know, studying astrology, we learn that everyone has Rahu and Ketu somewhere. Everyone has Saturn somewhere. Everyone's suffering, you know?
Absolutely.
So you gotta get compassion. Yeah.
Also, when you were talking about the Karakamsha thing and the career, what is your take on Atma Karaka and the importance of Amatya Karaka?
Yeah, Amatya Karaka can have to do, or I might not be pronouncing that right, forgive me.
No, it is. You are.
Yeah, so it might have to do with, it can also have to do with your career a little bit, because it's the secondary factor, but it has to do with also like the people in your life that kind of help you, and sort of like how your 2nd house has to do with your friends and your close family, like your loved ones, like friends and family, we say, or like things that are very near you right when you're born, like clothing and food and items and things that support you. So in the same way, the 2nd highest degree planet, the Amatya Karaka, is like that too. It's like the minister of your life, like the person who helps you. Like if someone has Mars as that planet, then they'll have more like a lot of like bros around that really like support them if they're a man, or sisters if they're a woman, you know, because Mars represents siblings or teammates or kind of like brotherhood.
Yeah.
So you'll have like people around who are more, you know, like sort of independent and martial type people who really get a lot done. If it's Venus, you'll have a lot more supportive ministers in your life who, you know, want to shower you with luxuries or things. And, you know, all those planets represent a figure or a karaka or a producer or a signifier of something, you know, and then like the Dara karaka is your spouse, the one with the lowest degree. But yeah, they can represent people in your life, all those different karakas. So not just the Atma Karaka. You can read the charts from them too. So in the same way that I was saying how you could read the chart from one's Atma Karaka, you can read about your friends, your ministers and helpers from your Amatya Karaka.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Meaning like their life or your life, as in through Amatya Karaka?
I guess it would be mostly their karmas, how they connect to you. It wouldn't
how they connect to you. Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't show their whole life, but it would show like how they're going to support you in some ways.
And also, this is a very interesting topic when you talked about Dhara Karaka, the planet with the lowest degree that represents your spouse. So now in astrology, we have the 7th house. Mm-hmm. We have Venus. Mm-hmm. Then we have Dhara Karaka.
Yeah.
Then we have the Navamsa.
Yeah, it's getting
what? So somebody will ask you, let's say I come up to you and say, Corey, which one is my spouse? What is Dhara Karaka versus Venus versus 7th house versus Navamsa? And
Yeah.
how can you simplify that?
I mean, you can simplify it, but again, let's consider what we're doing here. We're doing a pretty crazy science, and we're expecting to, you know, determine a person's life and all this stuff. So it should be confusing, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, if we want to do this well, it shouldn't be easier than a lot of things. This should be harder than doing chemistry or doing a lot of things. You know, if you really think about what you're doing. So it's not easy right off the bat. But yeah, how do we look at these things? So the Navamsa is going to be how you do in your committed relationships. The Rashi chart is just the women you meet on your path. The Saptamsha chart is sort of in between that. It's like the people that you're going to meet, or at least how I see it. It's like dating. It's like, can you connect with this person? You know, could you have a child? That's why it's the Varga of children and of and that sort of thing. But it's not necessarily like, will you anchor to each other and spend your life together, which would be the Navamsa. So you want to see both of those doing well. For a marriage that is ideal. But then you ask about Venus, you ask about dark heart. Yeah, it gets confusing. So, and then when you think about looking at all those in these three charts too, you know what I mean?
And the 7th house itself, and the 7th lord.
Yeah. So,
like, is my spouse Saturn, Jupiter, Mars? I mean, what's going on?
There will be mixtures of it too.
Yeah.
They're all factors. So, you might have one factor indicating that the moon is your Dara Karaka. Yeah, so the moon is your Dara Karaka. And so that might indicate like a really fair-skinned partner, you know what I mean? Or a light-skinned partner and a beautiful partner with like round features, you know, like ideally feminine features. But then Rahu might be with it too. So then it's like a foreign partner, you know, or like a more dark, not the light skin thing, darker skin, or a foreign partner, or a partner who maybe is a widow, because we know, or we learn from Jaimini that if Rahu's aspecting the 7th from the Karakamsha, then the spouse will be a widow or someone who's like not fully has their heart in it. Like they're not fully over their last relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's so many things that modify it. So there's no real easy answer to that question. But I look at, again, I use the Jaimini stuff for the objective factors, like what is the spouse? So is the Dara Karaka is really important for the spouse. Like, is it a foreign spouse? If the Dara Karaka is with Rahu, that's very likely. You know, so things like that are just concrete, objective things. But then and then there's other Jaimini stuff, like from the Upapada, you can tell if one will marry or not and things like that, but that's too complicated for now. But then if I want to know more about how they're going to get along with this partner, I look at the Parashara stuff, the Lajitadi Avashtas on the 7th house, on the 7th lord, like you're saying, on Venus, and I factor all that stuff in. And sometimes it is confusing because there's a lot of factors saying opposite things. And when that comes up, I look at the dashas and the timing cycles. So you look, and if the Vimshatari dasha is saying, which you just made a great book about, you know, get the book if you don't know about this.
Yeah, you read it, so.
Yeah, so the Mahadasha is like, say it's in a Venus moon period, and the moon is one of the planets starving Venus, then we'll say, okay, this period, they're going to be more of the karmas of being kind of egotistical about relationships is going to come up, and they're going to want things to be more about them and not about the relationship and stuff. But then if I look and there's another period running like just moon and Rahu, then I'm like, oh, this is when they meet the foreign partner. You know what I mean? The foreign spouse. So there's no easy answer to that. You have to factor in a lot of things, but I do use Jaimini stuff for more of the objective factors, like do they marry or not? What type of partner that do they have? What type of qualities will the partner have? You know, like if Jupiter is aspecting the 7th from your swampsha, you'll have a good, attractive, beautiful partner. like an ideal partner. If Mars is aspecting, the partner will have, you know, like an injury or a pain or some kind of burden that makes them sort of just a little more of a burden, but still there. Yeah, and then I look at the Parashara stuff to determine more of like, why can't you enjoy it?
Yeah. So, but I mean, let's say, you know, how if you want to know the personality of the spouse, let's say what man is looking at, want to know their personality of the spouse. In Parashara it says to look at Venus, 7th Lord, but then also Dharakaraka. So, which is the actual personality then?
Okay, then I would lean towards the Parashara stuff for the personality. So I would look at the 7th Lord. I would look at Venus. So if Venus is in, you know, Scorpio, then this partner is going to be more, you know, like more intense, or maybe into astrology or into the occult or more spiritual. If Venus is in Taurus, then they're probably a really beautiful, ideal, like earth goddess type woman, you know what I mean, or something like that. And that would definitely impact their personality. So yeah, I guess I would stick to the 7th house, the 7th Lord, Venus, the Lord of those things. But at the same time, like if you want to, not at the same time, that's good for that. But if you wanted to know about like the body of the spouse, like more objective things, look at the Dharakaraka and the sign that it's in, and that will say a lot. Like if the Dharakaraka is in the sign of Capricorn, Capricorn's a bigger bodied sign according to Parashara, so it'll be a bigger spouse. Or if it's in Scorpio, Scorpio is a small sign, so that person would be a smaller, you know, like a more petite type of woman or husband.
So Dharakaraka does not tell us about their personality, their outlook on life then?
I mean,
because there are people who just use only Gemini. They don't even use Parashara sometimes.
Yeah. So I wouldn't really say that. I don't really look at the Dharakaraka to. I mean, there's overlap. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, but no, I would say lean towards the 7th house, the 7th Lord and Venus. That's just my sentiment, though.
Okay. So when it comes to divisional charts, what is your take on the meaning of Navamsa? What is that chart for?
Navamsa is a really fascinating chart. It's basically, you know, it's the 9th chart, and the number 9 is the grandest number. No other number exists grander than it that isn't an addition of other smaller numbers.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, the 9th sign is Sagittarius, the sign of the guru, or of like the vision, you know, like the bowman, being one-pointed, getting the big picture. So the Navamsa has a lot to do with your big picture. Like, what do you anchor to? What do you commit to? And for most people in the old days, that was marriage. Most people, what you were going to commit to and anchor to, and what your purpose was to marry and to, you know, carry on all the culture and traditions and lineage. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's the chart of marriage. But it's so much more than that. You know what I mean? And I had a long time it took me before I really realized how important the Navamsa is. I never understood, why is the Navamsa the chart of the spouse? Yeah. You know, like, well, shouldn't that be the 7th, you know, Varga?
Yeah.
One for the spouse. And so I always had a hard time with that. And the 7th does have a lot to do with the spouse, but the Navamsa is, what do you marry, basically? So it doesn't mean your spouse, but it means whatever you're going to get married to, in a sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's what you anchor yourself to.
Okay.
You know, what you devote yourself to. And so, or like Ernst says, it's the ashram you choose. So not everyone chooses the marriage ashram. Some people choose the brahmachari ashram of just trying to focus on themselves. Like, I want to be the best astrologer I can be, you know? So that would be indicated in your Navamsa. And they don't even care about marriage, you know, or like an athlete who's just like wants to be an Olympic athlete, doesn't care about anything else. That's shown in his Navamsa. And other Vargas, of course, too, but that commitment is shown in his Navamsa. And from the Karakamsha and the Swampsha and all the stuff we're talking about, that really shows like what you're going to commit to, you know? So that's kind of the thing. Like, and another thing is with the Rashi chart, you might have an amazing path. You know, the Rashi chart shows you just your whole path. But how grateful are you of it? Do you feel devoted to that path? Some people that are like, you know, super rich, they have BMWs, they get a hot wife, they just feel, you know, they get everything in the world they need, but they're super empty and unhappy and unsatisfied, and they're not devoted to anything inwardly. That can be shown by having a really great Rashi chart, but a trash Navamsa chart. So, you know what I mean? So when you see that, the person really needs to work on like their own self, you know, and being grateful and to strengthen their Venus, the key planet of the Navamsa, you know? So you can look at Venus and see how good Venus is doing as one.
It's like the Atmakark of Navamsa.
Yeah.
How sun is of the birth chart.
Yeah. So that tells us right away what the Navamsa is about. It's like, you know, Venus is such a great benefic, you know, like Prashara says it's the greatest benefic, which I was blown away when I read that. I always thought Jupiter was considered the greatest one, but Prashara actually gives Venus. And so that really says a lot about, you know, what the Navamsa is. It's how much fulfillment are you going to get out of the path you choose, you know? Like Venus has a lot to do with how we make decisions, like Libra, the scales, you know, weighing the scales and weighing the options. So we do that with our Venus. And if we have a good Venus, that means we love ourselves and we have a good self-worth. So we probably make a good decision in that regard.
So if, let's say, somebody has a debilitated Venus in the birth chart, but an exalted Venus in the Navamsa, what is your take on that? Just that one planet, how would you interpret that?
Okay. There are a number of ways that this could be interpreted, of course, like any placement. Right off the bat, the first thing I thought of, though, was the person probably doesn't find a lot of like women on their path, you know. Say it's like me, like I didn't meet a lot of women, you know. I wasn't super lucky, but the one that I do meet, I really appreciate, and I commit to that person, and I probably end up being a lot happier than the person who, you know,
always meets women on a daily basis.
Yes, and then also remember how Parashara says that the Rashi chart is the chart of the body, and the first house, you know, like the appearance in the body. So the Rashi chart might say that, well, that partner isn't super attractive, you know, because it's Venus is debilitated. Like the partners maybe doesn't appear to be like this amazing wife, but really, when it comes down to it, she is. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's because of the Venus is exalted in the Navamsa. So does that kind of help you?
Yeah, absolutely. And what is your take on like debilitated planets versus exalted planets? Have you ever always see a 10 out of 10 times where a debilitated planet is going to do what Parashara said or Gemini said, or do you sometimes are baffled like, wow, this gave me a completely different outlook?
There's probably, it's like 9 out of 10 times it is true, but then there's always like a 10th one that sort of stumps you and you're like, huh? Like this one person I know that I'm like, how is your Jupiter exalted? You're the like always trying to boss people around and just being really not gentle with people and stuff. But then we have to think about, there's also, that's only one chart. There's 15 other Vargas we didn't count. And so, you know, yeah, Jupiter can be exalted for a whole year. But during that whole year, there's going to be some like not very ethical people being born as they're older.
Because of their padhas and nakshatras.
Yeah, and so we have to take in everything into account. And then the Vargas, Jupiter could be exalted in one and then debilitated in the other 15. Well, it can't really be that way, but it can be like that. It can be very, very mixed, you know? And likewise, you can have a really weak chart in the Rashi and sort of write that person off before you look and see that, oh, well, you know, yeah, Saturn's fallen in the Rashi chart, but it's exalted in all these other charts, you know what I mean? And it's in good houses, you know, and it's in the 10th house, so it can still do something. And then that's not even factoring in so many things like, yeah, like nakshatras, nakshatra lords, their connections, you know, it's not even factoring in like the Lord of Saturn, the debilitate, you know, so many things.
So talking about that, how do you use nakshatras in your own studies?
well, I wish I could use them more. I wish I knew more about them.
Yeah.
They're so mysterious. Everyone is, of course, using nakshatras when they do Vimshatari Dasha because it's based on that. And I use things similar to that, like you covered in your book about the if the lord of that nakshatra is like the planet, what nakshatras, and factor in that planetary lord.
Yeah.
See what it's doing. So that's, of course, that's very logical, and that works pretty well. Yeah, I was just going through your book. I was like looking at things in my chart, you know what I mean? Like everyone does.
Yeah.
And it does, it works. It's very insightful. And then the nakshatras are just really like, I'm not an expert. Like Michael Reed knows a lot more about them.
Yeah.
I learned from him. I watch his videos. I learned from him. It's definitely a much more confusing subject since there's not just 12, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the moon nakshatra is always going to have an influence. It's going to, have a say on your personality. It definitely has a say on mine. You'll notice a lot of just general fields that people are involved in are going to be shown by their nakshatras. Like someone who's really into medicine will have planets in Ashwini, or like the the 1,000 healers.
Yeah.
Healers. Healers will often have that coming up. See that a lot.
Yep, very true.
Yeah, Ardra for people who are really fiery and like
in technology, information technology, because it's like that electric storm.
Yeah.
Electric storm, that internet.
Internet. People who sort of like are on the internet, even maybe if they're not, like their career or something has a lot to do with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I'll just factor in, I don't know, I think of it almost as like a field of it, or like a field you're involved in, but surely I'm not an expert on that. So that's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
So, and I think really we should not talk about things we don't know a lot about. That's the first thing. You know what I mean? Don't spread a bunch of nonsense. There's already a little bit too much of that with Cosmopolitan and all these, very superficial astrological sources.
Yes, very true. And what is your take on Sastyamsa chart, the highest of the?
Yeah, so the Sastyamsa is just really cool. Right off the bat, I notice it really has a lot to say on spiritual figures, like people who get enlightened,
Yeah.
I'll be looking and I'll look at the Rashi chart. I'm like, yeah, okay, Jupiter's Ramakaraka, or there are things going on that make a lot of sense, or the ruling planets in a moksha house and all these things. But then you have to think that like a bunch of babies were born on that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look at the Sastyamsa. For the few saints or people who we know their birth time, you look at the Sastyamsa and you're like, oh, wow. And I think that's neat because Prashur says all areas are important for the Sastyamsa, not just one house.
Everything, yeah.
All planets. But he does mention the 12th house as important, and the 12th house is like enlightenment and samadhi and liberation. So I don't know, like I just started noticing that. No one's ever told me that, but that's just something that if any of you guys are studying, let me know if you also find that to be true, because I've found like just all kinds of like siddhas and perfect masters have a really interesting D60 chart going on,
that's very true. Like, especially whenever I see like somebody who's suffering in marriage, troubled marriage, and I'm like, okay, Venus is in Libra, and then Venus is in Sagittarius and Navamsa, and seventh lord is okay place. But then when I look at Sastyamsa, the final disposition of Venus, and then I see, oh, that's where it's hurting.
That's a good way. Yeah.
It's like that final dignity, the soul of the soul.
Yeah.
What is the soul of the soul? And that's where I see this. And also one thing you can also use with Sastyamsa is, I started doing it, and it just, even Navamsa, Sastyamsa both, like there's something known as Padam Chakra in Vedic astrology. Like it's a BSP, like Bhrigu Chakra Paddhati, where you take one house as 1 year, second house as second year, 12th house as 12th year, and then you come back to the 13th year.
Okay.
You can read the entire without the Mahadashas.
Oh, wow.
Like the 31st year is the 7th house.
Oh,
So
wow.
what can happen at the 31st year if you're single? to get married.
Oh,
So for Navamsha, I've started doing this in the past 2 months. Navamsha and Sastyamsha people have accurate birth time. I can read that as a normal child. I'm like, okay, did you? And I ask him, did you or your father had a surgery when you were 8? And they would reply back, yes, my father. And had nothing to do in the birth chart, nothing in Navamsha or Trimsamsa. Sastyamsha just showed it like a regular chart. So I'm like, my goodness, this is, and you see how complicated then it gets. Then I'm like looking at it, I'm like, okay, should I be using birth chart at all? Or should I just be using Sastyamsha? Or should I use, you see how the mind just goes a little crazy then.
Oh, yeah.
That's the magic of Sastyamsha. Like, I finally figured it out. I'm like, this is just as a normal if the birth time is correct. Usually when I'm doing a consultation, I see, 20 seconds is changing. And if it's changing in 20 seconds, I'm like, dude, I cannot use that, and I don't want to rectify it. It's just going to be too long. So
yeah. That's really funny you say that, because I was actually just listening to some course within the last few days with Ernst, where he was saying, like, I sometimes wonder if we should just look at the Sastyamsha first. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like what you're
the Sastyamsha is telling these. So this is why when I noticed anytime I had somebody who was like talking about troubled marriage, and yes, most of the time you'll see in the birth chart, you'll see in the Navamsha, things are happening in the 7th house with Venus, but sometimes you just don't see it at all in the birth of Navamsha. And then when you just put your eye on the Sastyamsha, and that's when you see, oh, okay, I see. So from that, I got the fact that Sastyamsha is very important. And this is why the accuracy of time of birth is important in astrology, because an astrologer should be looking at. So in my software, I have Navamsha, Dasamsha, birth chart, moon chart, but I also have Sastyamsha there too. I always somehow look at it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we like if we're coming out of these like sort of dark ages, so who knows, that might have been a much more important
maybe they just studied that. They just studied
But now, and since like birth times, aren't accurate, it makes sense that it wouldn't be easy for people to get a lot of information, or, it's slow. I think in the future, we're definitely going to be spending a lot more time on the Sastyamsha for sure. Because it's like you said, it's like the final thing, the final say, all these things say this, but then at this 2-minute window,
that's showing you the real picture.
Yeah.
Like even relationship with the mother or father may look very good in the birth chart. Even Navamsha may give you a really good, because it's the 15-minute time difference. But then in Sastyamsha, when you see the trashing of the moon or the 9th house, and if you just say just based on Sastyamsha, man, your father just was not there, was not present. And yes, that turns out to be true. But in your birth chart, if you just looked at it, you're like, oh yeah, great relationship with the father, and then that's when you just lose that, so.
Yeah, and then again, Prashara says the 12th house is the most important house, and that's the house of sort of like, what do you finally get? It's the last thing, and it sort of has to do with like, letting go, but also like fulfillment. What are you finally, fulfilled by? Venus is exalted in the 12th sign, Pisces, and so it's like, there is the 12th house is oftentimes bashed as like all about loss, but it can still give you things too. It's like the final say,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just like you're saying though, that D60 chart definitely shows the final say. The day that this enlightened person got born, not everyone got enlightened on that day, but at a certain window of time, it was right, and that's when he took his first breath or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
Fascinating.
I know. So Corey, thank you so much for coming and spending time with me. This was absolutely great. I loved it. Yeah. And thank you for editing my book as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's really an honor to be
Absolutely. Here. I want to actually bring you on again, talk about more of the relationship side, because I think you have got that. So, and I know people are fascinated with the relationship astrology. So we'll bring you back to talk about that. So right. Thank you. And then if somebody wants to get a consultation from you or read your material, where can they go?
Yeah, go to www.eyeoftheveda.com, because like astrology is called the eye of the Veda.
Yeah.
Way to see the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's my site. If you forget that, just Google Corey Dowds astrology. I'll probably pop up.
Have you written any books?
I have not. See, I haven't even written a book. I haven't even made a YouTube channel yet. So that's why I feel so honored to be on your show and everything, because you had such really accomplished astrologers come on here that I was kind of nervous But yeah,
let me tell you, the true astrologers are the one that are like hidden. They are like the most hidden people. Like I didn't know about you till I met Ryan, and now I brought you. I'm like, man, this guy is the cathedral of knowledge of Gemini and astrology. I mean, here. So don't worry about that. That's all. It's all like Rahu stuff, all this YouTube stuff. So
I don't know how people can do like everything that they do, you know, like Ryan and Ernst are like teaching, doing readings, or, you know, writing books over here, over there. I'll get there. But
you know what it is? It's passion. It's 24/7.
Yeah.
Like with me, astrology is just 24/7. So whether I eat, sleep, take a shower, whatnot, it's just it's their This is why I'm able to do this, because it's just that I just want to know it all. You know, it's like a buffet table.
That really is the thing, and I can tell it about you. I think that's why people like you, is because you really genuinely love it. Like
I love it, because otherwise, if I had any ego about it, I would have bought nobody. Why should I share my wealth and fame on this YouTube channel? But I knew from the fact that I have to learn, and the way to learn is to share it with everybody else and to give people the importance that they're going to teach. It's like Guru Dakshina for me. You came here and taught, and I gave you the light to thousand people. Is going to keep building each day when people see this video in the future. So this is why I just feel so, egoless and humbled. Like, because I learn more. People don't get it. By bringing you, everybody else, I'm learning. The world is learning, and you are gaining from it. So I'm doing my, just my duty here.
Yeah, one thing that. Yeah, I think it was Ernst that mentioned it when I was first taking a classroom, and I really liked. He was like, the word guru just means heavy. I mean, there's another interpretation of it. One of the interpretations is heavy if you look it up, and that's like, so guru is anyone who just has a heaviness of experience with something.
Yeah.
And so, like we're all really gurus to some degree. You know what I mean? My neighbor is a gardening guru, so I go ask them what to do about plants, Everyone is like that,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on the show. And at some point, I'll write some stuff and I'll have a YouTube channel. But yeah, I've really just been doing readings and studying astrology and been quite content with that,
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get there at some
point. But you also have a Facebook though page, right? Corey Dowds, it's your page people can like.
Yeah, you can look up Eye of the Veda.
Eye of the Veda on YouTube. Yeah, that's what I did too. Okay.
Yeah, and also one more thing that's neat, just since we're in eclipse time, is that, I could have made a YouTube video or gone on YouTube at any point during the last 4 years or so since I've been more professionally doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But I first went on YouTube on Ryan's channel back in April during the last eclipse.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah, and the eclipses are in my first 7th house right now, and my dashas running are activating my 7th house, and Rahu in the 7th.
That's fame.
Yeah, and then the day that you called was a sub Rahu period, so that was really neat. And Rahu was in really good dignity with its lord by transit, so a lot of fun things happening. So I was surprised. I didn't see it coming, because eclipses bring out surprising things. But
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So you get the fame, man. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.